So, Meyerhold. That's where we were. So I'm not going to possibly be able to believe that somebody who creates some of the best stuff theaters can do doesn't know who Meyerhold is. I'm not going to believe it. And if you don't know, you should know. I mean, there's something that's I'm very lucky that I had the privilege to go to an incredible art school in a place that valued the arts. I could also choose to take incredible academic courses as well. And that I also was lucky enough, having gone to a great high school, that I knew what it was like to pay for my education, that it was up to me to demand the kind of education that I was paying for. I was the customer. So I was the person that was a pain in the ass that used to go and demand a better teacher for something. If Yeah, sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not very concerned. If I spend so much time worried about how you feel, that's how we got to the point where we ended up having a bunch of women that felt it's how we end up in situations where we actually do have a lot of crime and a lot of harm, because fuck all that, there's no way we're getting out of this if that's the way people think. And maybe that was actually the point, because I don't like confrontation either. My demanding that I not squander my chance at a good university education because a teacher is not doing their job, or the university has lost itself in some administrator's powerful use of how to look. Organizing and revolutionaries and all that stuff, the reason why these things keep happening is they're very good at what they do. Are you going to tell me that after almost 200 years of figuring out how to, you're going to tell me that the very people who managed to usher in the Russian Revolution and kill all the Mensheviks are not really good at what they do? Of course there are. And what it is that they do is they create like in any communist system, they create a nice little gaggle of mediocrity underneath them to elevate them up, put themselves underneath another mediocre leader who is somebody they can point to all the time and blame when things go wrong, and be ready to pounce when the opportunity serves, where they can feast on the power that they love. Maybe I'll find a way to do something with this. Maybe I'm just talking into the ether. Maybe I hallucinated when I thought maybe somebody was in there out of the corner of my eye, and I was actually talking to myself this entire time. But I'm not sure if anybody was there or not, so I'm going to try to tell people one more time that I'm back. Just in case. I said started live again after glitch. So the arts and science being not separate. When you understand that they can't be separated, you can understand, for example, and recognize how often the arts can be used as a way of, just through technique or tactic, used as a tool for something that is absolutely not artful at all. But when done really well, there's really no difference. So take the use of, take all propaganda, for example, or even things, ideas like all this stuff we talk about with military, or what governments are doing, or these nudge things, these things that are supposed to help nudge you. These are all just expressions of the arts being placed and used pragmatically. I'm not saying it's being done by artists, but it's art. And I look, I'm only making the distinction of artists and not artists because there's no way to say, are you a good witch or a bad witch? Art says things that can't be said in a normal way. Art is novelists are artists, painters, of course, sure. I sometimes feel that actors are, some are artists, some performers artists, but there's nothing wrong with saying that some people are craftspeople. They know their craft. They're really, really good at their craft. Hours and hours and hours of practice. I know that the feeling for some people who play instruments and are really good at playing, being able to just express the music on the page of somebody that is an extraordinary composer and artist, just that experience, just having the ability and the talent to do that comes from practice, that's all it's about for them. Like you or someone who might be hearing this, is that you just love to jam, or you love to paint or draw. You got better and better at it. There's nothing less than in being a craftsperson. When you're somebody, when I hear the word artist, it comes with a huge load of responsibility. So does the word doctor, lawyer, nurse, mother, statesman, general. Sure, to every degree, there's a degree of that. But in some, there's a reason why I feel betrayed. And I don't know the people who are betraying me. Oh, some of them. But the reason I feel betrayed is the same reason why when you watch a movie that depicts betrayal and you cheer when the bad guy who's been really bad, it's more than just doing bad things. It's like when somebody breaches an unspeakable contract, right? Like, to make it more mundane, right and wrong and good and bad, we've been teaching people that this is so binary, and it's not. Like, to make it a personal thing, like, I would rather somebody not tell me, for example, if I was in love with someone, that they cheated if they felt terrible about it and didn't ever want to do it again and just didn't know a way to tell me without it hurting me, that they would love me so much that they would want to spare me the pain and just not do it again and try and just, it's who they are, then tell me of it and then expect that I somehow now have taken on that betrayal and it's all good and they still don't have any, like that's the weird thing about things like apologies, right? Or the way here's a great example. And it always goes, I mean, the reason I'm using this was another example in the arts. This kid who's in an arts music program in Michigan thought it ethical that he tweet out how a professor had shown Othello with Laurence Olivier, and that how dare he be so tone deaf to the use of blackface, and how he didn't even warn people. And holy shit. Do you realize anyone who does teach about the history of hatred and bigotry and racism that has happened, do you hear what I just said? They don't get it. You are letting people, you're letting people, you're letting people take, you're letting people profiteer on pain is what you're doing. And they're really good at it. Somebody taught this young man who's an art school that this made sense, that this was justice. And he's in art school, trying to be, this. They managed to make this professor quit. He didn't even get to share. God, I do hope somebody who's in the arts hears this, because it's hard to explain this stuff without going all the way back. But let's say, Liviu Chule, who left Columbia theater program. Man, was he right or what? He left because he said, I left Romania for the communists. I don't need it here. It was possible to think we had time when he made that warning. It's not possible anymore. Whatever anyone has told you about how great life is for artists under communism, they are lying to you, because they want power. They don't care about art any more than anyone cared about art when they did the public version of Julius Caesar. They didn't. They cared about politics more. And then someone's going to tell you that all art is political. They're lying to you. All art is dangerous. All art has the potential to impact things like politics, because politics is made up of human beings, and art is one of the most human things we do. The thing, though, is no one gets to claim that an ideology is required to make profound and great art, and we know that. Do you honestly think it's like when Abigail Adams said to Jefferson that you really expect that the snake that you've created isn't going to turn around and bite you? Really don't think so. I think you do know, some of you, and that's what you want. It's the only thing I can come up with. That I think there are people out there who are artful and talented and know the arts, but there's something they love more, and that is they like to watch. They like to watch the pain and the suffering that no one can do as well as people who are equipped with the knowledge of how to do it artfully and well. You're going to tell me that the architect who created either Auschwitz and all of that, or the architecture of recently of Facebook, you think that they're not artists and good at what they do? You don't think they are? They're very good at what they do. They have a knack for something. Maybe they were a prodigy, or maybe they spent some time reading the prison experiment results. Who knows? Or maybe they are so one-track minded that for them this is war, and now this is the art of war. Could be. Very likely, actually. For those of you who don't buy into that, For those of you who don't think it really matters, who are worried about, who's hoping somebody hears this, that their head is still in like, New York will be okay because the election's coming up. You know what? You're right. You're right. New York will be okay. Just like other cities are still around and okay. But all the things that you ever thought that made this place special, the stuff that made Leonard Cohen sing about, or Lou Reed, or ushered in real liberalism, it's going away. All those things that you thought you hated about Republicans, it's coming from inside the house. Sorry to tell you. Could it be the far right again one day? Like I remember in the 90s standing there and protesting against them for trying to shut down Corpus Christi, the play at City Center. Sure, yes. In fact, I could very well see the new woke being the unwoke, but remember that's new woke. The woke now, people right now who are manipulating your emotions are no different than the people who manipulated other people's emotions and tried to censor artists, and that made artists like, God, Dee Snider, where the fuck are you? Where are you? Where are any of you? I want to believe that you're just holding on to something because it's a terrible sacrifice trap. But I don't know. It's possible that you were just taught to hate. I know a lot of artists who are like that, whose parents taught them to hate. A lot of New Yorkers like that. They didn't realize they were being taught to hate. Or you had a lot of bad teachers that taught you to hate. And we do know it is true that it is very difficult to teach somebody to stop hating something. But maybe the part of you that knows that bigotry is bad will recognize when you're being a bigot. Maybe you might realize when all the things that you might hate about capitalism, so supposedly, it's coming from inside the house. Again, crony capitalism is not somehow equitable. It's the opposite. It's no more equitable. Frankly, it's no more really about communism than Stalin was really about communism. So in futility, I'm hoping that somebody, like I said in the last out there, who has a semblance of really believes in what they're saying. We don't have to agree, but we can at least agree. That how many art forms need to become barely recognizable before we realize that we have to stop pointing fingers at anything or anyone else. It's not the technology's fault. It's not a politician's fault. It's not an institution's fault. We have to admit that we just don't love it enough to demand something from it. And I will tell you that, does it really suck to see it and really be aware that so many other people don't seem to care? Yeah, it does. Does it suck? Is ignorance bliss? Yeah, it is. But I can't go see Company. I can't go see Hamilton. Would I want to necessarily see it with a new cast? I don't know. I loved the original cast, and for that amount of money, I'm not sure, because I've already seen it in time. I'm not a groupie. But right now, there are groupies. It's akin to like when there were all those groupies about Rent. Imagine if a bunch of them were homophobes. That would have made no freaking sense. That they would be going onto the Twitters and talking about how, you know, that would not make sense. This doesn't make sense. Lynn Emanuel, this doesn't make sense. I've never met you. I don't know you. I don't know if you'll ever see this. Somehow, Mike Meyerhold, I think the saddest part is that I think some people have realized that you don't need to kill a person or destroy them or even care about them or torture them or turn their ideology or anything. And you don't even need to change anything. You just need to worry more about whether or not the possibility of people who are just different enough to create things don't get to for numerous reasons, whether they don't ever see something that might inspire them. I mean, how many, you have a thing with racism, how many people that maybe when the first time they saw Rodan, something sparked in them and they suddenly realized how much they wanted to not even become a sculptor. Maybe they suddenly saw how they could become a baker or a chef because they could see the connection between carving out of marble and plating a beautiful meal. Or someone saw the drapery in the line, in a beautiful vintage Dior dress, and suddenly they saw something that made them understand why these things aren't frivolous and what's the use and the uselessness of art. You are going to tell me that that's not any less horrifying than knowing that you've willfully removed somebody's chance from becoming a doctor that could cure cancer just because we didn't get them the education that they needed. You're at the education people need. You're there was a time when places even like the Met Gala or the Oscars or any of these things that were expressions of glamour and things that most people would never be able to even, that you might end up making somebody, a girl, dream about their wedding or a boy dream about his. And now you're supporting idiocy and lies, and you know it. Somebody there, you like, no one, it's impossible that there's not some people worthy of their stewardship in New York. It's not possible. I know that for a fact, actually. And anyone who thinks that they can't do something because of the way the politics are, it's impossible or the risk or nothing will change, then what the fuck are you stewarding? Doctors too, I feel so bad for them right now because we've let people in universities override the expertise of people who are in medicine and let it sound okay. This is worse than what happened under the Soviets for two reasons. One, under the Soviets, people were still educated because they wanted an educated populace, because they wanted to show how, they wanted to prove that their ideas worked. Even Stalin did. It's something to prove. Right now, I don't even think that we're dealing with something like that. When you hold people in contempt, it's worse than hating them. And there's a lot of people that hold us all in contempt, and I mean including the people who think that they're on the right side of history here. Because I don't personally know, for example, the woman who claimed that I was selfish for criticizing what's going on in the theater, or that I was criticizing about masks. I don't know if she knows what she's doing, but it doesn't really matter to me, because anyone who's in the theater who doesn't understand the impact of masks needs to learn. I recently saw on MIT's website, I think it was, I'm 99.9% sure it was MIT. And the reason this stood out to me is that MIT was also responsible for making or publishing an article that was the first moment I knew something was very wrong. March 17th, 2020. They said, this will be a small price to pay for the simple freedom of being with other people. There is no such thing as a small price to pay for that. And I don't care if somebody can argue or logically try to formulate a way that works. To quote Ionescu again, logic is a beautiful thing unless you abuse it. So I don't need anyone to understand that, but I will tell anyone that is in the arts, especially in live performance, that is pretending that this doesn't have an impact. You are so wrong, and you know you are. At the very least you could do is you could admit that it has an impact, and then talk about, as you are, the incredible sociological possibilities about the various ways that the marginalized people can express themselves in their version of what a mask looks like. Fine, go ahead, go there. But don't act as if like those marginalized people's little kids walking around like this doesn't affect them. What are you bothering being an artist then? If seeing somebody else's smile, or seeing something else, if being an observer, being in the audience of something has no impact, then what are you doing? Again, you're just somebody who thinks politics are more important and that everything is political. So sorry then that you don't think you have the capacity to really be great, like Meyerhold, or so many of the other ones who, even if they would make statements like, do you think that what made 1984 and the rest of his work great was the fact that he was a socialist? No, he was great, which made those works great, and he was probably a great socialist, meaning he was not just focusing on the ideology and that it could do no harm compared to anything else. That is not what that man said. It's not what Oscar Wilde said. It's not what Joe Papp said. Ideologies separate us. Dreams and anguish brings us together. That's what Eugene Ionescu said. If you are so perverted that you think that the ends justify the means here, I am so sorry that having access to some of the most incredible art and theater and people and minds, that for whatever reason somebody told you that you were not worth really incorporating that. In March, someone said to me, when they were asked if things were opening up here in New York, someone that has a bit of influence in these things, and they said that the theater was going to open up, but with vaccine passports. And when I told them that that it's our job not to let that happen, it's the job of the artist not to do something like that, and to really think about this. And that person said to me that this wasn't art, it's business. I am so sorry that somehow someone convinced you that there's a difference. But not just that someone convinced you, that you let yourself be convinced of that. Or the people now who are allowing children to criticize and focus the criticism and turn Broadway into a reality show with as little, with less actually respect than people would even show a successful reality show. I mean, listen, I may not like reality TV, but there's some reality TV out there that's done masterfully, and it's done as an art. It really is true. And it makes the history of it even more ironic, since it was during a strike, union strike, that started to become something. But this isn't even good reality TV. This isn't even good bad reality TV. I mean, nobody's going to want to watch it. Nobody. It's just crude. It's insulting. Vulture, talking about your coverage of a recent Tony Award winning show, indulging that, making it seem like that any of that was a valid, propagating this idea that somebody's identity is more worth defending, and that you could actually miss the fact that you're standing on a Broadway stage. Like, they're not awake enough to see that. It's being so woke is okay to not experience the holy shit, I did it. Why take that away from them? I don't understand that any more than I understand why people are taking it away from a young poet. Or I mean, is Carnegie Hall next? And I remember when I was a kid, I got to play there once as a really little kid. I don't even, actually, it's funny, I don't remember that at all. I know I did. I don't remember it at all. Because something happened and I stopped playing piano, and it doesn't even matter what. However, when I graduated from Tisch, we had our graduation at Carnegie Hall, and I remember all of us standing in the back getting ready, 18 and cocky and sure of ourselves, and we started to sort of make fun of where we were, and oh, it's no big deal, playing it cool and all that. Not a single one of us, when we stood on that stage and looked out, didn't feel that thing. And if you never felt that thing, or if you honestly for a second could think that thing is less important than all this so-called politics that you keep defending as being like about helping people overcome unfairness of the past, do you hear yourself? Do you see it? Like, maybe the crime of I look at it like a crime, the crime of lockdowns, shutting us down, and shutting down Broadway and making people believe that there was a reason to do that, that it was that dangerous, more so than 9/11 and all of that. Maybe that's the reason why people don't remember. I'd like to think that that's it, but I don't know. You take away people's humanity, you take away their ritual, you take away their expression of art, you take away their ability to be together in groups. See, you'd think that once that was offered back, people would, the moment you tried to stop people from having the access you have, while using words like access and equality, maybe that wouldn't make you see that you are playing games with people who, if you let it keep going, they're going to hurt you very badly. They will. I keep talking about art because it's really anything, the silence coming from people who are religious leaders. They're going to hurt you really badly. Or after they hurt people really badly, a lot of you will turn around and not believe or recognize yourself, and you won't have a very good time of trying to come out of it, because most of the people who would have had the heart to forgive you won't be able to do that because they won't be around. That's what happens when you keep destroying first the people that are the most sensitive to these things. The weirdos and the, I mean, is it like, just, to those people, like, it's kind of like we should have known, like with the way cancellation and all that shit was going, we should have known that this would happen. But I don't know about you. I did not think that we would let it go this far, and we should have thought that. I mean, I think about some of the people that I knew, kind of people that were willing to say things like, to cut you out of their lives ever for fuck it. We should have known how the last 4 years went. I don't care if you like Trump or not. I really don't care. If you're going to tell me that the level of rage and animosity that he expressed now, don't even try to compare it to Biden, because, sorry, that's not rational. That's, at a certain point, people have to, who are smart, and I know they're out there, have to stop clinging to this need to be right. Because, fuck, man, that's the only way I'm going to be wrong. And if I'm not wrong, we will have never seen anything as bad as this, even after all the dust settles. And by we, I mean the people who are in the arts and who are weirdos and passionate and writers and poets. And I say that because imagine being thrust to a place like North Korea, for example, or even in China, where there are some amazing art coming out of China. But we're now somewhere that has the audacity to do what China's not doing. Do you know that? Everyone talks about, I mean, yeah, they just disappeared a celebrity. But you do realize that we tried to disappear all semblance, all opportunity to view an exquisite piece of art that came out of China, that the thought of doing that, while they would do the other thing, didn't even occur. Because they're not that petty. That's really a mind fuck, isn't it? It's such a mind fuck. So maybe it is that simple. Maybe it is that all the people that were really great are dead. And we created a technology that allowed people to have voices that never should have. And this whole idea of equal access and all that. Even the liberal experiment failed. Fine. Fix it. Start up again. Because the reality is that if it's something is, what is it? We know this. Every single person who's ever tried to make something bigger than themselves knows this. If everybody could do it, if it was easy, everyone would do it. It's not easy. New York wasn't an easy place to live. Didn't mean it that it was. People wouldn't sit there and think that it was okay to just treat each other like worthless because of allowing themselves to be downstream from politics. I think that's kind of it. We have let ourselves be sullied and dirtied by something as crude as politics. And is it really any wonder when so many of the great people that would have called us out on it are dead? So I guess I'm going to call it, I don't know what to say other than I am not equipped. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to tell us to do. I don't know what to tell people who are. I can't even talk about medicine or religion. I can't talk about any of that. But for the artists out there, we need the people like need this is a problem that's more than problematic. And what right, I qualified. I didn't have the guts to go and do anything and try anything to be a theater director. As much as I may have wanted, I didn't have the guts. So I know this about myself. So where are the people? There's people who are great dramaturgs, and they were great writers. A bunch of people who were canceled over the last 4 years or so. I mean, for fuck's sake, even anyone who knows what that's like. There's so many names running through my head. Where are you guys? Where? All the people who ever thought that it was going to be the government or the Republicans that would stop funding art. The problem is coming from inside the house. Like, come on. It doesn't matter whether it's Democrat or Republican. Is it a one-horned rhinoceros or a two-horned rhinoceros? It doesn't matter. Speaking of which, why isn't anyone putting on rhinoceros? So many people have left New York, and I don't blame them. Fortunately, a lot of those people, the people that used to inspire me and make me feel like I was actually had something to say and worth listening to. And as I'm talking now, I have no idea. All I do know is that I'm sad to say that I know I'm right on this. And I don't know how to get anyone to fix it. And that's one of the worst things about all this. I feel shitty every time I'm not allowed to go into something. And simultaneously, I'm mourning why I'm not, what has happened that allowed something that would never let this happen to die. I try not to be angry about it because we never had, it's like we've literally allowed people to turn us backwards to a degree that we never even really were. It's almost like we're all living some weird version of some professor of sociology and gender studies and whatever. It's like their version of reality that they see how it. We're all living in some warped version of the 1619 Project without recognizing that the persons and people that get hurt most by these things are the very people that some of these people are claiming that they're doing these things for. The problem is coming from inside the house. Like, it's simple. It's really a simple, it's 2 + 2 = 4. Totalitarianism and bigotry and intolerance of individualism equals an end to all the things that we love. Maybe no one else loves it. Maybe there's a new generation of people who are coming up who just like, I don't know, workers' art. Let's call it that. I don't care. You could have your ideology, but you can be more like Joe Papp. They don't get to claim, how would it be? They don't get to claim space just because they're claiming space. You get it? It's creating the monster that they're supposedly fighting against, and you're letting it. Like, the theater had Mae West, August Wilson, Cabaret, ushered in and brought with it so much of gay rights, true diversity, real diversity, fairness, gave Jews a place where they were even allowed. I never thought that people could hate other people just because of the way that they think. Being in a position where I will agree with people who are just choosing not to get the vaccine because of an ideological agreement and kinship and like-mindedness, while simultaneously knowing that I can't do it, even if I wanted to. And I'm so grateful that there's very few moments that I want to, because that means I'm losing something about me. But the reality is that I don't want to. So it's put me in a position where I got to swim in and really feel what it's like to be hated for your religion. Feel me? Convert it or die. What are we doing? even convincing people that you can do that. I was looking at this book called True Believer by Eric Hoffer. It's thoughts on the nature of mass movements. It says two things I noticed. I found it interesting that he talks about the difference between a mass movement and practical organization. And he says, in the beginning, he says, it is a truism that many who join a rising revolutionary movement are attracted by the prospect of sudden and spectacular change in their condition of life. A revolutionary movement is a conspicuous instrument of change. Not so obvious is the fact that religious and nationalist movements, too, can be vehicles of change. See, he says, in this country, the spectacular changes since the Civil War were enacted in an atmosphere charged with the enthusiasm born of fabulous opportunities for self-advancement. Where self-advancement cannot or is not allowed to serve as a driving force, other sources of enthusiasm have to be found in momentous changes such as the awakening and renovation of a stagnant society or radical reforms in the character and pattern of life of a community are to be realized and perpetuated. Religious, revolutionary, and nationalist movements are such generating plants of general enthusiasm. In the past, religious movements were the conspicuous vehicles of change. The conservatism of a religion, its orthodoxy, is the inert coagulum of a once highly reactive sap. A rising religious movement is all change and experiment, open to new views and techniques from all quarters. I think that's a misnomer. I think that we've let ourselves believe that the actual thing that isn't stagnated and isn't always open to constant vision and change is when we don't have a Emersonian self-reliance. And that he was absolutely dead on right about that. That the minute that goes away, then conformity is suicide. The minute we start thinking that we can somehow be a better human is when we somehow conflate the idea of greed and desire, or wanting to better something for yourself somehow made you not aware of the impossibility that for most people, that when you're bettering yourself, you can't harm people along the way or make life worse for them along the way and actually better yourself. We're seeing people who do think that way right now, holding the reins of power and belittling, and in cities like New York. And some people don't believe that way, but they're just too young, and their social circle is just, they've been trained too well to conform for them to really allow themselves to realize how wrong that is. I mean, don't the people like, I'm 43, don't the people who were part of the good parts of the hippie generation, don't you see that every single thing you stood for is gone? That you're willing to let it go for some politics that you're letting the real issue be completely obfuscated by politics, and not recognizing who would do that and why and how fucked up that is, because you're so convinced that one man is that bad, that? Are you still so caught up in the whole Nixon thing? Are you kidding me? None of that makes sense. It doesn't make sense. If you understand how, I guess what I could say is, do me a favor and don't hate me more than you hate a stranger or someone you have nothing in common with, simply because you don't seem to understand that you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So I could say, don't hate a man more than you would care for me, but I'm realizing even asking to be cared about doesn't work any more than a Jew could have begged for their life from a Nazi. It doesn't work. This is an ideology, and in this ideology, people are convinced that, and it comes out of some wacky version of partisanship, which George Washington warned us about. When he said that this stuff could get like cancerous, he wasn't kidding. This is that cancer. So there's people out there who are convinced, because people have kept drilling it into their head, people who come into their homes and who they trust, whether those are celebrities or talking heads or brands like CNN. And look, those are they make me so angry. But why are you letting people destroy all the things that used to make you believe that whatever has now become Mao wrote this essay called Combating Liberalism. I'm so sorry that people who don't understand what liberalism really is have been taught that all liberalism is bad, and they use that word and like, oh, liberal, and you're being irresponsible. They're just, some people are very good at packaging things, and Americans are one of those people who are really good at packaging and selling something. The reality, though, is if you have ever thought that liberalism had anything about it that was worth fighting for, in the sense of like, oh, I don't know, that there was any link between liberalism and ushering in movements like the revolutionary mindset in the 60s, then why the hell are you throwing away liberalism for the people that you were once claiming were killing kids? Or, I mean, are you so, have you become the monster that you hate because you don't recognize the word bigotry anymore? I mean, look at, I admire people like Glenn Greenwald and all of those ones who've come out of their Naomi Wolf, who are willing to separate themselves from their group, because what matters to them matters more than them. They really believe something. I don't have to agree with them. Bernie Sanders, even, there's a level of it to him. He's always stuck to what his beliefs are. My mom recently said she respects him for that. I'm like, you kind of gotta. I don't have to agree with him, though, and I don't have to like his tactics. But where are all the people that had those beliefs, a strong belief? Where anyone my age or older, look at what we're letting people that don't have the experience to recognize when they're being used. We have an entire generation of people who have never seen anything but this. They don't know what's going to be lost. This guy on the street tonight, I was kind of crying on my way home, and Maxine stopped in the middle of the street And I was embarrassed because I picked her up, I had my headphones on, and I was talking to her saying, you got us killed doing that. And I noticed this guy to my left. I'll admit, he was definitely too young for me, but he was kind of handsome and wasn't wearing a mask. And I noticed him noticing, and it was just nice to actually have a human moment with someone. And I always struck up a conversation. And when I asked him how soon he moved, like when I told him sort of what was happening, you could see that there was this recognition of something, but also this. When I asked him how long he's lived here, he said 4 months. And I'm always happy when people move to New York. Or I was always happy, but my immediate reaction was, I'm so sorry that this is what you're seeing now. This isn't who we are. And he seems sort of fine with it, and it made me a little uneasy, I have to admit it. And he said something like, well, everybody's moving to New York now. Why? I asked, is the prices are low? And he said, no, the prices aren't low. It's still very expensive. And I said, then why? Because if you're young, he said, if you're young and you want to be around other people and you want a social life, then you come to New York. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, I'd like to have one too, and it's part of why he's not wrong. And then he told me that he moved here from San Francisco. San Francisco has been has had a boot on its neck for so long that this place feels free. And they don't see any reason to fight for what really was here because they've never experienced it. That's it happens over time. And it's something I think that we have to make a choice right now. And this is everybody. One of the reasons why places like North Korea and China and other places like that, and some people, Iron Curtain fell in the nick of time. It fell when there was enough people to remember what they were fighting for. Eventually they'll die. And the people who never valued it to begin with won't even be writing about what made this stuff worth it. And even if you don't love cities and don't like cities, you can't deny that cities are important to a country. And if you think that some form of, I really would love to have a personal private talk with somebody like Michael Malice, who is advocating for secession, because if you think that America is going to have anything left, if we destroy things that were, maybe we've stopped talking about American culture. Maybe we need a little dose of chauvinism. The American musical began here. Jazz began here. Postmodernism in an art, which is not the same as the philosophy, began here. If you like Rick and Morty or Simpsons or South Park or Deadpool or Monty Python or memes or laugh at YouTube things, you are experiencing what postmodernism as an art form ushered in and did. It recognized that there was something incredible that could come with the self-referential, that you could recognize when an art self-referred to itself, and you could sort of be in part of that there was some it's like a veil would drop and you would suddenly recognize in yourself something as well. And it's been bastardized by people who, do yourself a favor, and if you want to understand something a little bit about Judith Butler, Google Judith Butler Worst Writers Award, and you'll see that when I'm talking about elevating mediocrity, I ain't kidding. And I'm sorry, no, even if she may have advocated for something for anybody who was marginalized and done well, I'm not going to tolerate that as being enough of a reason to defend somebody's lack of ability any more than I'm going to cheer if Kamala Harris becomes the first woman president, because frankly, women deserved better. And so did anybody who's fighting for gay rights, women's rights. The only thing that benefits from any of this shit are the programs that produce them. How is that any different than the patriarchy or homophobia or racism? It does the same thing. It really does. It's one of the things I realized tonight when I saw CNN tweet out this whole bullshit thing, which it is bullshit, just like all of this stuff is bullshit, claiming that the people who get the vaccine have died from less of everything. Supremacy for political purposes is still supremacy no matter what, whether it's a Nazi or a fucking bad writer, copyright writer at CNN. Do you expect the viper that you created not to bite you too? People whose lives are people whose lives are barren and insecure seem to show a greater willingness to obey than people who are self-sufficient and self-confident. I will certainly tell you that sometimes it's exhausting not to obey, and my life does feel rather barren, and I do feel rather insecure. To the frustrated, freedom from responsibility is more attractive than freedom from restraint. No, I would disagree. It's not more attractive, but the most insidious part of treating somebody like they are less than is that eventually they start behaving exactly like you're describing. I've had that happen to me in my life. I don't know how long it'll take. Inevitably, it will happen again. I don't want it to. Maybe that's why I'm putting this out there now before I'm human. They are eager to barter their independence for relief from the burdens of willing, deciding, and being responsible for inevitable failure. They willingly abdicate the directing of their lives to those who want to plan, command, and shoulder all the responsibility. Moreover, submission by all to a supreme leader is an approach to their ideal of equality. I think that we've always thought that there was a supreme leader who did all these things, and honestly, that's a mistake. Ceausescu, I dare say probably even Hitler, even though I can't prove it. Maybe even Stalin, even though I can't prove it. And maybe even, it's tricky with Mao. I think it's very rare that there's one leader. Oftentimes there's something that looks like a leader, and it's a little trick. It's like, yeah, the leader, everybody pay attention. Everybody pay attention to this terrible thing up here. And then underneath it, all the while, is this like disgusting, self-perpetuating grossness that's sucking on the free space that having a leader that takes all the blame controls or allows. And knows all along they're not going to be blamed. See, I mean, that's what happened when Ceausescu was shot. You know, when he was shot, he was not shot because suddenly, when he looked out at the crowd and he saw everybody laughing, he knew in that moment that he was going to not be shot or destroyed by his own people. He knew that it was going to be the people underneath him. And they shot him not because they were siding with the people. They shot him because they had to make sure they were going to get away with it. And they took power in Romania for a long time. And the kind of corruption that started in 1945, the kind of invisible hand that made people behave in ways that was inevitable when you were living under a regime that would do something as horrible as the prestige prison experiment. But see, also inevitable when they're so damn good at it that some of you have never even heard of it. Or some of you are convinced that Stalin is somehow not nearly as bad as Hitler. Or that there's a good guy and a bad guy, that Antifa is all good. They're really good at what they do. They've gotten very, very, very good at it. Listen, the killing has not gotten yet obvious. It's not in front of us. We don't see it like this. You know, we're not seeing piles of bodies. But just like Larry Kramer was talking about back in the day, this is like Eichmann again. It's the banality of evil. Convincing people that they have no choice but to comply or have society say, you deserve to die. That's sick. And we're seeing it. We're seeing it in how this girl's birth mom died in Georgia. And we're seeing it in how I'm afraid that talking about this, YouTube will ban me. And how I'll hate that I'll be banned and the work that I've done since June will be gone. But I would not be able to do any of that work if I didn't say it. Because I can't, even if it's, they ban, if that's what they do, then I'll know even more certainly that I'm dealing with people that are like the Securitate that I dealt with a long time ago and that I know about from then, and better to know. I mean, I know that a variation on that is what's at Facebook. I mean, it's obvious. It's like an algorithm written by them, though, so it's even more irritating because they're not even people. Like, but there's people who make those algorithms. We are letting people deny art to other people just because of a political position that is convincing them that something is anti-science. You know what? So what if it is? I'm not saying it is, but so what if it is? Are we no longer entitled to have crazy ideas in this country? Are you no longer allowed to have a crazy idea? Think about what that means. That one crazy idea that leads to something like, oh, I don't know, a plane won't be had either. That's not progress, or that's some sick arithmetic, is what that is. There used to be people who would, my family owned a newspaper for a long time. My dad was telling me today when I dropped off their dog that on PBS they were showing something about the McCarthy hearings in Murrow. And I told him, I don't want to watch. My mom made a little response like, oh, it's interesting they're even putting that on PBS. All the people who made certain things that have become what they once hated, any of those people that are still out there, we need you. We all the people who have done something wonderfully and successfully, the same worry you may have that you are potentially going to be unable to support your employees or workers or your stockholder. Come on, like, Live Not by Lies was written for a reason. And that reason was, this is a very old trick. And the sad part to me right now is that the people who have been most abused by these tricks, I've seen act like the way Meyerhold described himself under the boot while he was being tortured. But we're not being tortured. And just look at the way, for example, some people who have you that you would have, if you would say that Black American men have been mistreated in our country, and you aren't noticing the way Black American men aren't fucking around with this, then maybe, just maybe, the problem's coming from inside the house. Jews, I've always been told over and over again how we overcome adversity. My hesitancy to even express how heartbroken I am by the fact that I don't see anything remotely appearing to hold the kind of integrity that the ACLU once did. There's something going on the street out here. I hear it. It's fighting of some kind. It's not cheers or anything, so I don't know if anyone is. I want to look into what's might be going on in Midtown Manhattan. I will say though that if you want to know for sure why I've always said, and I keep saying that it's the arts that defeat these things, you want the proof? Let's go, Brandon. Right? thing, though, is that artists alone who keep rejecting some of the things that come out of science, but more so people in the sciences that keep rejecting the arts. Because we keep talking about this thing, God, STEM, STEM, STEM. Look, it's another, did you know that environmentalism and squandering of science and is kind of like, it's like a thing that comes out of that collectivist ideology, that radical one. It's sort of part and parcel. That's why you had Lysenkoism, and that's why you had a radical environmentalist movement that claimed things like eugenics and supremacy and need to destroy and get rid of populations. Listen, none of that science. That's an example of when you don't recognize the connection between arts and sciences, and it's also bad art. But the reality too, and it's in that thread I wrote, is, if we keep having scientists say that it's enough to say, show me in the data, or I need to see a graph, or demanding information come to them in a certain way because they were taught and trained that that's okay, that peer review is enough, you're squandering something as much as that artist who's not told when their stuff is shit, because you're not challenging yourself to become somebody who can look at the world and the knowledge of the world and see the correlation between, like, the Vitruvian Man, and I think I'm saying that right, and medicine, or can understand why a painter can give you a clue to why the nervous system is different than everyone's thought, than that, like Charles Bell or Carl Sagan or even Mao. He was an artist, he was a poet. People who think that a solution to people not experiencing or having access to the things that you feel they should through economic means, and not seeing what's happening now to me and to other people like me, you are going in the wrong direction. You've been tricked. So stop for a moment, take a pause, stop trying to fix something, and first realize that the game that we're playing, where politicians are trying to convince us, any of us, that something they're telling us is the moral way to go. Are you kidding me? That's not, are you that gullible? Just because somebody is in a position where they're called to serve, so they say, doesn't mean they're all good. It's like assuming that every priest is moral and would never ever harm a child because they're a priest. Are you kidding me? I mean, look, Woodrow Wilson was a moron. He actually said that the way to prove that there was not going to be any corruption in government was to build government and add more to the administration. That was stupid, all right? That was a bad, dumb idea. It's irrational. Thinking that the same, like, so let's say you hate one party, let's say you hate Democrats, let's say you hate Republicans, so you hate Trump or you hate Biden. If you honestly think that the same muck that created that is going to somehow promise you and tell you anything that's true, and that you should buy any of it, and then risk throwing all of the shit that you actually care about away in order to not feel guilty about having all that stuff you cared about thrown away, do you honestly think at some point you're not going to wake up and see this and be like, holy shit? Started talking about this, saying I regret and will always beat myself up for thinking that I would never care about having access to power. I'd like to think that if I did, I would still be who I am and I would still fight the way I do. I know there's a lot I don't get. I know there's people who are worried for their kids. But at this point right now, when we've reached a place where people are getting used to a New York that's like this. My mom tells a joke that she knew the EU was going to go to shit, like the EU, when they when they stopped allowing poppy seed cake. Sorry, let me rephrase. They stopped allowing people to buy poppies because they claimed because they were plant poppies. They were claiming it was for drugs, right? And the Hungarians got really upset about that. Or the first moment when the French went Mondieu and they noticed the price of a baguette. See, here's the thing though: is some people. Why did you say this? Some people really like being told what to do. They even more than they like being the ones to tell people what to do. It is of interest to note the means by which a mass movement accentuates and perpetuates the individual incompleteness of its adherents. You hear that? It needs that. It needs people to feel incomplete. It will never solve anything because they need that state of mind to stay in power. Every person who thinks that wearing more masks or getting more vaccines think that they will ever stop it. No, they're going to keep doing this because they need you to feel incomplete. That's the truth. By elevating dogma above reason, the individual's intelligence is prevented from becoming self-reliant. Read that again. By elevating dogma above reason, the individual's intelligence is prevented from becoming self-reliant. Economic dependence is maintained by centralizing economic power and by a deliberately created scarcity of the necessities of life. Social self-sufficiency is discouraged by crowded housing or communal quarters and by enforcing daily participation in public functions. Now, I get some people will say that they're preparing and they have the space in the room to prepare stuff and that they're not experiencing this and they can avoid it. You can't avoid it, and that's not a solution to this. As time goes on and innovation happens and modernity adds confusion to what is experiential and real and what is not, and this bullshit of the desert of the real implying like there is something that isn't real, you can't escape it. Read that part again. Economic dependence is maintained by centralizing economic power and by a deliberately created scarcity of the necessities of life. Necessities. We're not talking about this in a more kind of to every man to his for every man to his ability and to every man for his needs. No one can define necessities. Sure, air, water, but we're not cattle. We're not chickens, and we're not even tulips, as beautiful as they may be. Social self-sufficiency is discouraged. Social self-sufficiency is discouraged by crowded housing or communal corridors and by enforcing daily participation in public functions. Ruthless censorship of literature, art, and music, and science prevents even the creative few from living a self-sufficient life. The inculcated devotions to church, party, country, leader, and creed also perpetuate a state of incompleteness. For every devotion is a socket which demands the fitting in of a complementary part from without. Thus, people raised in the atmosphere of a mass movement thus people raised in the atmosphere of a mass movement are fashioned into incomplete and dependent human beings, even when they have within themselves the making of self-sufficient entities. Though strangers to frustration and without a grievance, they will yet exhibit the peculiarities of people who crave to lose themselves and be rid of an existence that is irrevocably spoiled. I'm going to try to show you something. I have one theory about all of this stuff, that if we stop the mask bullshit, everything else might collapse. So, why not? Working theory. So, about the performative and the science. Now, I'm in New York, so I will say that sure, there were certainly moments where I may not want to breathe certain part of the air, and or whatever. I have not worn a mask since they reinstituted mask policy in my building. I will rather not ride in the elevator with somebody who lives here who wants me to put on a mask. And there's one simple reason: they don't get my home too. So what I mean by that is every time I would do the performative of putting on the mask, I'm actually participating in a ritual. And I know that the body has a muscle memory, and anyone who's a performer will tell you the same thing. So for example, if you're sitting in a chair and you just look up and do this little slothy smile, you sit there for a little bit and you feel what you feel, you'll start to realize, and this is actually even a Buddhist technique where you just do that soft smile, you start to feel happy. Now, I hate to say this, but right now, I don't really care about feeling happy. I care about not really being able to pursue happiness at all, which is a big difference. Now, I'm not saying that that's the case for everybody. So if that works, or if you are someone who tends to, if you're depressed and you find yourself, all folded up like this, if you notice that when you sit up straight and you just walk, sometimes you have to fake it till you make it, meaning you walk before you feel better. Why? Because the body remembers certain things. Our bodies we're a lot smarter than we think we are, and we're a lot dumber than we think we are in both things. And now anybody who's ever done any theater of any kind will tell you that a mask creates something. We know that. So if I'm, one more thing. So in this article from, again, MIT, it's probably out there somewhere, talking about how we can celebrate the use of masks in various cultures, and how we can incorporate this into this very this moment. Oh, fine, why not? But in culture, wearing a mask for performance that's not what's going on here. Whoever's writing that shit, they're talking out of their ass, because they're trying to somehow make something artful without acknowledging the fact that they're basically making an excuse on how to add a snotty little twist onto something that's purely totalitarian. or a way of adding some intellect to the argument when when somebody may not when they so that they can add some level of, oh, you redneck, you don't even know what you're talking about. Yeah, and I added a little bit of that southern accent because the irony is, a lot of the times I've noticed the people who are the most vocally critical of Middle America just came here from Middle America. Of course, it's like the same idea. You criticize your own thing, you criticize stuff you see in yourself, and but there is more to it than that. And when it comes to artists who are doing this shit, I have no, or teachers, I have absolutely no sympathy. So you've got the cloth mask, got another cloth mask, and I've got the fancy schmancy mask. Now, in any of these, there's something going on. Now, I will say that when masks suddenly started to look better and different, I was relieved to not be running around wearing, and seeing only people running around wearing a hospital mask, because that's a little bit like a walking nightmare. And it's supposed to be, because masks are supposed to scare you or have you pause and recognize that you're living in what ritual studies people call liminal space. It's another form of donning something that expresses and portrays something. People are trying to convince you that it's all the eyes are the only thing that's expressive. People who are trying to convince you of that are also trying to sell you something, usually. And that's, they're trying to sell you what some would call normalization or normalizing. Like when they say, we can't normalize Trump. Well, see, it's kind of funny. Trump was already pretty normal. It's just they didn't like it. This is abnormal. Wearing a mask every day, but most importantly, putting one on a child, this is the thing that's worrying me the most, is abnormal. I don't want to hear that there are some cultures that do this and it's perfectly normal. No, I don't want to hear it. There are also some cultures that, I don't know, have a organ trade where people's eyes are being gouged out while they're alive to donate their corneas. So yes, some people do things that it's normal for them. And I'm sure there's other things that came from terrible things. But no, we are a people who choose something different than that. And we are allowed to do that, as much as people who like to view it as polite to wear a mask. It used to be that people who were serving their polite to wear a mask is that if they weren't feeling well, they didn't want to sneeze, and there are other ways of doing the same thing. You stay home. There are certain things that some cultures do, all because we all do them. That's no longer even about a reason. Why do men wear ties? I don't freaking know. Did it once have a reason? Sure. Do I much care about men? No. It seems kind of dumb to me. Maybe someone could explain to me. Maybe they're similar to high heels. I don't know. I'd have to find out. Couldn't tell you. But I was really happy when people started wearing things that look different. So this is the mask that I would have tended to wear all the time because, first of all, it's practical. Also because to me it looks more like a thing that is like a bandana. So going to like Burning Man or something. But I'm telling, look at this. This is not a bandana. This is not going to Burning Man. This is not any of those things. This is something where the moment I put it on, I feel smaller. I feel more insecure. I dare you to put it on and just feel what you feel. This may sound hokey and cheesy, and it may even sound like something only an artsy-fartsy person would say. Someone even may say, why are people able to do that in hospitals and not feel that way? Well, let me ask you something. Do you think it's just the mask that makes them feel prepared and responsible and ready to go? And do you not realize that there's a lot of careers in which going from one thing to another, that the uniform is sort of like a costume that helps them understand that they're going from one space into another space. That when you don something, that you're in that moment taking on something bigger than you. That's why. It's more than just, what are you going to say, that we should all run around wearing scrubs now? Or that the extra caution that a doctor takes, just in case, for several reasons, justifies not recognizing humanity. Because if that's what you're saying, I would like to let you know that the artists were the ones who explained to doctors that they should use ether and anesthesia during surgery. Did you know that? Did you know that it took a man not pointing out all of the reasons in a peer-reviewed paper that we should not think that pain is required for healing, and those screams of a writhing patient aren't superficial or petty or something that's just a luxury to find a way to avoid? Did you know that? We need each other. If you really think that a world of public health rather than a world of medicine is going to somehow be moral, either you're dumb or you're lying. If you really think that people who are convinced that running around like this, KN95 mask, all day is comfortable and makes sense, and that a child can do this, and that this has no consequence at all. And if they can do it, why can't you? First of all, remember all those faces we were seeing after nurses were wearing this for hours and hours and hours, trying to have us feel bad about what they went through? Now we're supposed to feel bad because we're saying no to this, but more so that we're saying, don't you put that on my kid? We're saying, I'm not a parent. I'm saying, don't you put this on the kid that one day will be responsible when I'm old. Don't do this, because I don't want to one day end up being in a position of vulnerability and needing somebody who you destroyed their ability to have empathy, or threatened it out of them, or taught them that it really doesn't matter, but you keep talking about empathy because you're not talking about empathy. What you're talking about is an empathy canard. It's the opposite thing. Empathy is what allowed somebody like Charles Bell to see wounded bodies and people, and in the late 1800s and after the Battle of Waterloo, allowed them to see that and said, wait a second, let me actually do more than just capture the because there was no photography. I'm going to draw what's going on in someone's faces, because I suddenly think maybe there's a link between emotion and pain and the nervous system. And there, wow, lo and behold, he was right. We behave as if we understand everything about the body, because there's all these people who are, of course, we must understand everything about the body and the mind because we're creating AI. So clearly we understand everything. Liars. We don't know where memory is. We don't really understand it. We don't fully understand why it is that you take somebody who is has a dementia and you play music for them that they loved in their high school, and they will suddenly talk to you completely lucidly. We don't understand that. We also don't understand how somebody can have a little injury like I had, and suddenly their body tells them that something else is going on, any more than we understand why people behave like insane mad people. And in Munchausen by proxy, we don't understand we don't know, but we do know that manipulating people using science and medicine kills hundreds and hundreds of millions of people. And we do know that teaching somebody that doing something with their body just because somebody told them they had to leads to people getting abused. Every single person who's worried about child abuse, who's worried about people abusing kids, who doesn't realize that, I hate to say this, every time you teach a child that no one is going to stand up for them and say, even if they don't even know, that they really don't want to be, they just want to conform. No, you are not walking out of my house in a mask. You are teaching that child something. You are relinquishing that responsibility. Do I have to read it again? Peoples whose lives are barren and insecure seem to show a greater willingness to obey than people who are self-sufficient and self-confident. Right now is not the time, though, to make an excuse. Right now is the time to say our children, and by our children, I mean humanity's children. I don't mean government's children or the society's children. I mean it the same way I might say our pets or puppies, whatever, are being hurt. And the media, whatever, it doesn't matter how much they tell you that it's not a bad thing. We're being hurt by believing this does all the things that they're claiming it does, that it doesn't do and doesn't cause harm at all. Least we could do is talk about what it does do in both, right? I mean, I'm sorry, do you honestly think if somebody's wearing one of these 8 hours that they're not risking getting another form of respiratory illness? I don't care how many times you wash it. I mean, anyone who has a CPAP machine can tell you something like this. But in here, there's actually no ventilation. The point of this is to let nothing this way, even if it lets a little bit that way. We are not designed to have the moisture of our body up against us like this for so long. Ask anyone who's ever spent time in a hospital. I once had a crazy infection where I was on a Demerol drip for 10 days and my tongue was this swollen. So I was like, oh, and I was drooling. Like after a while, if you leave any kind of moisture against your face for extended periods of time around dry, shit happens. We all know this. I mean, this is basic hygiene. Do you realize that would mean that the very people who are running around like the Queen, no one in masks, Bill Gates, these people's mindsets are basically, ooh, maybe we need to recreate a peasant class again who doesn't understand basic hygiene. Even if they're telling you to wash your hands. I'm sorry. They're not teaching children basic hygiene. You need to learn when you're a kid to wash your face and wash your hands. You're sending your child to a place when they're 5 or 4 or 3, 7, all that I needed to know, I learned in kindergarten. They're not learning at all. Just hearing it from here. And you are allowing people like Randy Weingarten and other people who believe that their ideology is more important than any individual or child. You're letting that person do that. You're letting even maybe your own ideology do that. Why? I have yet to hear a reasonable thing. Now, I hear people, I feel bad, and I feel really guilty about this because I hear parents say, well, they'll send my kid home and they won't be able to go to school. Then let's build a parallel structure to help you. If you come out and say, I need help so that I don't have to put my kid in this place, rather than I'm going to wait until a politician fixes this place. If that's the reason that you can't just stop it, because they're not going to stop until people stop. And I get that not everybody has the ability to stop. But then ask for something that can really help if you really feel that way, because it used to be that when children were the ones that were vulnerable and parents would scream out for help, we would all jump and help. Why is that? Anyone think that's still not the case? It's because some part of you, by this abuse, has been made to be convinced that you're wrong about this, that you are somehow killing grandma because you don't want your child abused. It's insidious. It's wrong. The only person that can stop that from becoming your reality is you. And anyone who's been in an abusive relationship can tell you that. The only time that I was able to get out is when I chose to get out. I didn't even really know I had chosen. And the abuser will never admit they did it. Ever. Not that kind of abuse. Not the kind that redoes reality. Not the kind that it may seem so foreign that people would take a photograph of themselves behind children masked. Or that the same person who might tell you that it's okay not to give your dog every single vaccine will try to convince you that giving a newborn 24 hours old a vaccine for Hep B makes sense. It doesn't make sense. This is public health. This is public administration. These things aren't designed to make sense. Bureaucracies don't make sense. In fact, I recently saw somebody defend a bureaucrat, defend bureaucrats. That's scary. A bureaucracy we used to know that bureaucracy sucked because who wanted to go to driver's ed? The same reasons why none of those places change are the same reasons why the only chance we have in hell of saving the places that we came to count on, public hospitals, public schools, is if you don't comply. And I say this most of all to New Yorkers because we have a revolutionary Marxist in power as mayor and a complete screwball as governor. If you honestly think that with the next mayor that's going to be enough, then part of you believes in authoritarianism. Part of you believes in the message that comes from totalitarianism, that they have the right to do this, that they have the right to be your mommy and daddy, and that you can trust them in wanting that. Anyone who wants to care for you when you're an adult like that, it's one of the first signs that you're dealing with somebody who has the capacity to be an abuser. It's the first thing we learn. It's hard to resist, especially, it's like a variation on a mass movement. And look, clearly, if I keep bringing up abuse and things like that, clearly something like that did something which didn't necessarily create for me, maybe it had an impact that I didn't get the life that I would have really dreamt about. It doesn't make me unqualified. I'm saying, don't do the mistake that I made. Don't do it. Please. Learn from my mistake. What was it? Otto Bismarck said, to be great, learn from the mistakes of others. Don't repeat other people's mistakes. And so we tell kids that because they get mandatory vaccinations of measles and mumps and smallpox, that's why Any other use of vaccination or medical intervention is okay. But that's not teaching them. We're being taught that the way the Supreme Court works is the same way another court works. A ruling is final, and that's what precedent is all about. No, that's not how it works. Just because something was in Jacobson versus Massachusetts doesn't mean that that precedent applies and is okay. I don't know why no other courts have brought this up or dealt with this. I don't even want to start with why I don't understand why lawyers aren't doing. It doesn't fucking matter. What matters is they're wrong. Don't comply. If you're in the arts, if you run a theater, a venue, if you're afraid that you might get, or a restaurant or a bar, and you're afraid that you might get fined and you can't afford that, say that. People will want to rally around and make sure that those bastards can't threaten you or coerce you. And even if there's more of them than there are us, so what? There's always less good than so-so people in the world. We know that. And if they destroy my channel here, so what? Even if nobody listens, so what? I'm saying aloud something that I can't say to people who are hurting me. And even if I get called names, so what? I know who I am. I know that I'm not stupid. And I know that I'm not anti-science. And I know that I'm not whatever other these fucking labels people make. I also know that I'm not a parasite or diseased or more likely to spread something than someone else, and that I'm or selfish or thinking that I could be. I know also that trying to understand crazy just makes you crazy. Doesn't matter who's doing it. Doesn't matter if it's the experts of experts or your neighbor. Otto something is a Nazi with 2 PhDs, murdered 30,000 Jews, at least. He's one of the main people charged in the Nuremberg trials. Why? Speaking of law and justice, so did you know that there was no such thing as human rights abuses until he created that at the Nuremberg trial? Like, he created a law and an idea on how to handle something like that. Shame is that it wasn't also applied to Stalin, but can't win them all. And they can't lose every fight either, obviously. But I don't know. There's something to me about this thing that the idea that I know that I can't do anything about some institutions bigger than me. But I do know also, look, I'm not even asking, I see the relationship between masking kids and the arts. I'm not even asking anyone in the arts to stop doing what they do. If you're on Broadway, man, fucking congratulations. Show must go on. Keep going. I'm not saying that. Not. I'm saying, say something. I'm saying, don't say something like, this isn't art, it's business. I'm saying, don't say, and I remember early on in the pandemic, I had an idea on how to get the theaters open early, and I happened to meet somebody whose family owns one of the families that own a mall. And I met a guy who was willing to donate all of the, he had factories and made shit out of plastic. And we had this idea of just creating all of these shields that you could put into in between seats so that theaters could reopen, and you could just find a way to do it. Because, you know, who says you need a proscenium stage, right? And who needs to say that these seats, you create social distance, anything, just get them open. And the response from somebody was simply to, nope, won't happen. I couldn't get a reason, couldn't get an answer. But it was in that moment that I realized our gatekeepers to a lot of our institutions are ideologues, not idealists. Nobody has taught any of these people just like, you know, everybody, we spend so much time criticizing people for being successful that we no longer demand from them the responsibility that comes with success. It's almost like they have to go in and out. It's like they're so upset and afraid that they're successful that it's like they get successful and then they got to get out of it as quick as possible to keep what they've saved, because we destroy our stars. We destroy our success stories. So much so that we lose the ability to even like take a joke. So if I ever have to wear a mask, the one that I choose to wear, if I'm really forced to, which doesn't often happen, the only place that I will do it is, and I'll wear a more respectful one, is when I have to go to a doctor's thing, because I don't know who's immunocompromised, and it's flu season, and honestly, it's a space between spaces. Going to a doctor or anything, but I'll tell you, not a single doctor I've ever met with has me wear a mask while we're meeting. They take them off, I take them off. I also want to say that, and this is actually interesting, my mother, when my father had surgery recently, she didn't leave my dad alone back when nobody could go in. My mom's comment was, I'm not listening to doormen. She knew there was no way in hell she was going to leave her husband alone. And there was no way in hell she was going to leave her husband alone. Do I know exactly how she did it? No. I'm just saying this because you'd be amazed what you can do when you just know what you're doing or won't do is right. And also what you can do with a little bit of humor. This is the one I always wear. And it still changes me, but it's pretty funny because it doesn't even really work very well. Like it's, I couldn't wear that, But this is the one I like to wear if I'm being forced to, because really it kind of is what we're dealing with. It is Spaceballs, the face mask, right? Merchandising, Spaceballs, the flamethrower. Each of these things, it changes me. I hate wearing them, quickly take it off. But at least if you're going to do it, and at least artists, if you're going to make excuses for these things, then make the fucking excuse artful, all right? Don't sit there and claim that because such and such tribe and such boat, that they're wearing of a mask, you could. That is such bullshit. Come on. You know it's bullshit. You know it's bullshit. Just like anyone who's, just like the producers of some shows when they are afraid that they're going to get labeled something, apologize for the treatment, or CEOs doing the same thing. It's bullshit. What's the difference between doing something that you know is bullshit in this case, and what's the difference when back in Romania under the Soviets, when everyone knew it was bullshit? The difference is not everyone knows it's bullshit right now. So if you think for a second that you are not responsible at all for this totalitarianism that was growing, if you are doing the bullshit, you are responsible. Me too. All of us. The moment we realize that, the moment we realize what we have to do to make it possible that we can stop, because they won't stop, only we will stop. That's why I think about how much is the cost benefit analysis of not getting some way for me to be able to see something. Hesitating with this. My dad and I were going to go to a concert that we bought before the mandates, and I was ready to get or make a vaccination thing, or my mom even would have given me hers. It was so funny. My mom was handing me her vaccine card saying, use I will never show this, darling. You show this. Just give them this. My mom won't work. Birthday issues here. But I appreciated the sentiment. It was for a Dead Can Dance concert, and my dad had never seen them, and he's really into classical music and not into this stuff at all. And I was so excited because he's 81 to go with me. And he wasn't being frugal at all, or like a dad, like, oh, that's expensive. He even said, I even pointed out that there was extra tickets to go backstage. And if he wanted him, I don't know what it was. Something about wanting to share music with me. So my dad and I'm so relieved they canceled it. And I'm so upset they canceled it. My dad and I, since I was a little girl, he used to bring me every Thursday to chamber music concerts. And I'll be honest with you, I like classical music very much, but not the way you probably hoped I would. Same with opera. It's not. Some I adore, but I loved every Thursday with my dad. I don't remember any of I remember the room, and I remember the way it felt, but I remember the conversations my dad and I would have on our way to or from, anything like that. And it was my dad that used to ask me, what is this a derivation of? Like, he would play something in the car. And he always had pride in the fact that he could recognize some music within like the first three notes. And I have that too. But he would be so happy when I would maybe spot something before he did, or catch the derivation of something before he did. I never asked this of him, but I think the reason why is what he was really trying to show me was, what's amazing about art is that every single piece, everything you do carries with it all the art that came before it. Except when it's bad art, then it just dismisses it. Or even worse than that, I can't even barely tell the story, but I tweeted about Meyerhold, and it's funny, I have a hard time talking about it. And I keep thinking about him now even more than ever, because he was Russian, and the reason you don't know his name, and you know Stanislavski's name maybe, is I can't help but say part of why we're in this position now. He was pro-Russian Revolution, which I'm not really sure whether that meant. I'm realizing that could have meant that he was a Menshevik, which means he wasn't a communist. And I'm starting to become less and less able to. There are some of these ideologies that we've created this monster out of Nazis, which has allowed another monster to grow. There could be two monsters, It happens. We're all really grown up now, so sadly, it's adult life. There's two monsters sometimes in stories. And he was the most successful and well-known theater guy of his time. The only reason I know much about him is because I was that weirdo that got lucky enough to realize that studying experimental theater wasn't just about a bunch of weirdos. That it could be a very serious business. So I was lucky in that. And so my training is in something called Grotowski. And Grotowski's creator was a guy named Meyerhold. And that, let's see. Well, it's somewhere here, but I wanted to show an example of how, without having to open the book, of how Meyerhold was part of a theme in or mentioned in every single theater text, performing art text that was about or discussing in any way postmodernism as an art, or experimental performance, or any of this stuff. And that meant that if you weren't just studying the basics and the classical and the craft itself, but studying the art and the art of the art and the history of the art, you know who he is. So there's a lot of people out there who know who he is. Peter Brook, who was an incredible director, who was in New York. He was actually, his family, he fled as they were Mensheviks. He wrote a book called The Empty Space and is probably the most beloved director that ever lived. Created a play called Why, but also he directed a Hamlet and specifically said that this was for Meyerhold, because Meyerhold never got to do his Hamlet. Now, a lot of this stuff that I'm saying, if you don't love the theater, it's not going to mean as much to you. And that's okay. Just hear the morality part, because you can understand that. Meyerhold created a technique called biomechanics, and he also was the first to really use symbolism in